Hello dear students, this is Dr. Saurabh Jain at Prodegy IAS, and today we will be discussing about the anthropology related subject or UPSC Anthropology related mains, what you should be doing, what you should not be doing while you are appearing for anthropology mains. And also in doing so, we will also understand how differentiably in paper 1 and in paper 2, what all topics they become very important or what all topics they become more frequent in the exam in the last 4 or 5 years. We can identify those topics also with respect to the syllabus and the type of PYQs which have been asked. And also we can look into the in-depth understanding of what all things have been more primary while you are preparing for anthropology, and you can give more weightage to those topics also. Now, understanding all these things or understanding all these phenomena, or you speak about various different things, the first and foremost thing that you understand is what is anthropology. You simply say anthropology as a subject or anthropology as a subject has been deciding or has been defining various different things. But the simplest form of understanding of anthropology is nothing but just understanding humans in the past, in the present, in the future is just anthropology. And the overall syllabus that you see in anthropology is also somewhere linked up to those things itself. So what becomes primary over here is understanding what all would remain more important in the contemporary forms. Of course, the basic nature of the anthropology related question paper has been more static. The number of topics have been more static. The dynamicity we do not see much in the anthropology, or the variabilities we do not see much in the anthropology. The questions do relate to the syllabus, but then too, in the vast syllabus of anthropology, what do you think can be more important? What do you think can be more something that can be more marks fetching? Because it is not only about reading, it is not only about writing, it is not only about you have read a particular book, it is not only about you have said discussed various things with different mentors, you have discussed various things with respect to PYQs also. It is also about what you should reach to, what you should read or what you should do to fetch more marks. Of course, with the topics like anthropology, or which are the humanities based topics, it is more important that we must understand that this particular topic is more important, or this would fetch more marks, or this would be of a lesser priority. This will give mark, but the frequency of giving marks is lesser. Understanding those topics would be the idea today. Right? So when we say anthropology, or when we understand anthropology, if I briefly define the overall syllabus or briefly define the overall understanding of anthropology, the UPSC syllabus clear-cut differentiates between the past, the present, and the future of humans. In a sense, why I have said this particular thing, the past, present, and future of humans, we'll understand that thing with the syllabus also. When you look into the deep down into the syllabus of anthropology, paper 1, paper 2, paper 1 speaks about the archaeological anthropology, or the understanding of anthropology and the archaeology of humans, or understanding the different we can say pre-humans, right? A simple term, pre-human, I would say, right? We'd be Australopithecus, Rhodesians, Neanderthals, or different things, their cultures or their tools which have been defined, Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, etc. These all have been discussed over here. This is the past of humans. It comes down to the overall societal developments of the humans, which speaks about culture, society, marriage, race, all these things which have been spoken of in this. And the language is also being spoken of as one of the major tools. Right? So that becomes the socio-economic anthropology. And then comes down the biological definitions of humans, where we find the biological development of humans, how humans have developed, how their genetical differentiations have been created, chromosomes, etc. All these things relative to the biological aspect of humans, that has also been discussed. Right? And then the applied anthropology in anthropology paper 1 becomes one of the important aspects, which links directly to the paper 2 also. The paper 2, which defines mostly the anthropological originations in Indian perspective. Right? So the Indian family, Indian society, Indian archaeology, the Indian archaeological sites, and then their interactions. They have been discussed in anthropology paper 2 also, and then the culture, family, religion, etc. with respect to India have been discussed, and then the tribal situations and the tribal problems, the contemporary tribal problems that have also been discussed, where the paper 1 and paper 2 have a direct link over. So when you understand this particular thing, when you understand, say, anthropology, or when you understand the basic paper 1 and paper 2 understanding of anthropology, you say anthropology, paper 1, anthropology, paper 2. When you differentiate over here, in the anthropology paper itself, you will find the section A and section B of anthropology, whereas in paper 2 also section A and section B of anthropology, right, paper 2. So when you understand the number of topics, the type of topics in section A, they have been more of archaeological and socio-cultural in origin. The section B have been more about the biological anthropology. The section A of this has been spoken of with the Indian anthropological development, and section B of this has been more of the contemporary origin over here, where the problems and the tribal understandings have been spoken of. Right. Now, when you look into this particular paper also, when you look into anthropology paper 1, paper 2, or the sections which have been discussed in anthropology, you understand one basic thing, that how to fetch more marks over here is to understand how the values have been given to the type of questions that have been asked in anthropology, or how the marks have been distributed. Now, when you look up to the anthropology paper 1, section A and section B, when you compare, the marks fetching abilities have been approximately 40% in paper 1, section A, but have been approximately 60% in paper B and in section B of paper 1, which deals with more of the biological understanding of the humans, where number of questions have been more, or the marks weightage have been more. We look up to these things with the PYQ also, 2024 PYQ also. Now, when you understand with paper 1, with paper 2 also anthropology, the paper 2 anthropology section A has a greater value where you can fetch more marks, 55% of the marks fetched in section A, 45% of the marks fetched in paper 2 section B. So when you compare this thing, if you are fetching more marks, or if you are looking on to more marks in anthropology, the first and foremost thing, or the first balance that has to be created, is section B of paper 1 and section A of paper 2. They have to be thoroughly understood. They have to be thoroughly understood, and the topics have to be thoroughly understood. Topics have to be taken into deep down considerations with precise understanding. With precise understanding also, the multidimensional interactions or the multidimensional interlinking of these topics is also important over here. When you look into this, or when you simply understand this thing also, we'll discuss the syllabus, the PYQs also, how and why I am saying all these things, or how we look into all these things. We look into this paper, which is 2024 paper, section 1, section A and section B has been discussed of. We can take up these things together, and then this is, I guess, the section, the GS paper 2, which is there, the anthropology paper 2. This is anthropology paper 1. Okay, now you have anthropology paper 1. You cut down the question number 1 and question number 5, which are the compulsory questions. If you look up to which anyhow you have to attempt, or anyhow the number of topics can be mixed over there. When you go down into this, the paper 2, which more speaks about the cultural aspect, where we have historical particularism, which is being asked from the cultural aspect of the anthropology, or the domestication of the animal, production and domestication of the animals with respect to Meragar, again the archaeological, and then critically examine the lifestyle disease and impact on the human health, again coming from the biological aspect of it. Then fieldwork methods and anthropological research, which comes up from the anthropology research dimensions itself, then the impact of urbanization on family, and then how does the analysis and diagnosis of the chromosomal aberration in the man is being done, which is again from the biological origin. Then you look into this, the genetic counseling, Moldovan traditions of Paleolithic, and then the Ritz-Benedict's theory, etc. And then the Homo erectus in discussions. Then you look into the forensic anthropology, suitable examples. Levi-Strauss has been spoken of with the thinkers, and the different Jacques Derrida has been spoken of, multilateral traits, applicability of the sampling technique, social stratification, and intense patterns of ABO, and synergistic effect of biological and cultural factors, which have been the major topics that you look into in 2024 anthropology paper, the paper 1. Now we understand this particular thing, or we link this particular thing, how to fetch more marks, if you simply understand the basic syllabus of anthropology also, right? You look into the syllabus of anthropology, the first and foremost thing which is being spoken of, the units that we speak of, units 1.1 to 1.3, which simply speaks about the significance of anthropology, where you will look into the meaning and scope, the relationships, the different branches of anthropology, which is the basic syllabus of anthropology also in in anthropology paper 1. Now this defines the major questions which are being asked in section A of anthropology also, which is the basic understanding. And if you look into this, this has been constantly there. This particular topic has not been somewhere down the track, has not been submerged, or this has not been, we can say, not been asked in the last 3 or 4 years. This is something which is there. One question you will always find, be it the forensic anthropology, which has been asked in 2024, or you look into the scope and relevance of sociocultural anthropology, which has been asked in 2023, or the systematic and objective holistic study of nature of the anthropology, which has been asked in 2022 also. So the number of questions, they have been there. So the first unit, or the understanding of anthropology over there, where how anthropology is being developed, what different scholars have spoken about the anthropology, and how anthropological understandings have been derived from different branches, from say socio-cultural, from biological, from archaeological, from linguistic purposes, how different branches of anthropology they have been derived, and how they are merging onto the current domain of the anthropological developments. Understanding those becomes important over here. Now linking this also, or the sub-relations of anthropology with certain different dimensions of the different subjects also, linking this to unit number 12 over here, that we will find, which has been clear-cut demarcated over here. The applications of anthropology, or the contemporary anthropology, also becomes the interlinked aspect of it also. Understanding these two units in comparison, or reading topics or the contemporary domains of these two things, becomes important over here, and they also fetch more understanding and more marks also. Of course, this remains in a domain of 15 to 20 marks every year. This unit, of course, has to be dealt, or primarily is being dealt by the by the students also, because this is a simple unit. This is nothing that has to be taken into much tedious understanding. Simple understanding, simple things that have been demarcated, they can be taken up over it. Right. Then you look into the second aspect of the syllabus also, which speaks about the human emergence and the evolution. Then the synthetic theory of evolution, where you speak about various different things, the Dawes rule and the Cobb's rules, and the Darwinian and the pre-Darwinian and post-Darwinian theories also over here, comes up over here. Then understanding these all things with the convergence and the adaptive radiation and parallelism, which are the different theories about the development of the humans, or about the development of the human evolution also, right? And then linking that thing to various different aspects of characteristics and the primates also. Now over here, one of the major thing that has been there, that can be taken up over here, which has been spoken of recently also, right? In 2023, you spoke about homogenization, and you spoke about micro and macro evolution. These are two major theories which can be derived over here, right? And these topics, again, they can fetch marks, but the number of questions limited to 1 or sometimes 2 in the year, like the Darwinian and the post-Darwinian theories, or these, they have been they have been there, or understanding of this has been there, and the Darwin's theory or the Darwin's understanding becomes important over here in this particular topic also. Now then you look into the primates, their development, and the bipedalism in primates, or the development of bipedal locomotion in the primates, that become important again over here. The bipedal, how the man has developed the bipedal motion, that becomes important. How the questions relative to this, the losses and gains of erect posture, that you look into 2022, or the Goodall's contribution studying primate behavior, that also speaks about various different things there, where the primates have been spoken of over here, the gorilla, chimpanzees, and the primates which have been spoken of, and their understanding and their characteristic developments, they have been spoken of also, right? So these two things specifically over here in unit 1.4 and 1.5, two things remain important over here. When you understand the basic theory of Darwinism, the Darwinism development, pre-Darwinism and the post-Darwinism development, there are only three concepts into that. And then understanding what is the bipedal motion of man, how it has been evolutionary developed, how it has been developed, why it has been developed, what all factors they have attributed to bipedalism, and how many things have changed in humans while the bipedal motion have been developed, be it be food, be it be the backbone, be it be the skull, the cranial cavity, the posture mechanisms, the overall phylogenetic developments in the humans that have been spoken of with the bipedal motion. And this erect posture and bipedal motion has been the major issue or the major thing to be discussed over here in these two, right? Now when you look into this, then you go into the phylogenetic status of the primates also, the Pleistocene hominoids or the Homo erectus. Now over here, these three, Homo erectus, the Homo erectus picensis, and then the Rhodesian man, they have been there. Neanderthal, Rhodesian, Australopithecus, and Homo erectus, they have been constantly there. They have been asked number of times in the last 2 or 3 years, if you look into, like for example, the Australopithecus and its discovery, and then the classical and progressive Neanderthals, and then the characteristic of the Homo erectus in 2021, 2024, again it bounces back to Homo erectus again, right? So when you understand this particular thing also, understanding these three, Australopithecus, Rhodesian, and the Rhodesian, Neanderthals, and the Homo erectus, they have been some of the important topics which have been constantly there, which have been constantly discussed of. So if you look into the 2025 mains also, if you understand the 2025 mains preparation also, fetching those topics or looking into those topics would also help you out in fetching more marks in these two units also. Next you understand is that we have more questions arising from the phylogenetic understanding, where the losses and gains of erect posture has been there in 2021. The Goodall's contribution has been there in 2023 also, Australopithecus, and then again the features and significance of Tonsberg Neanderthals, the Neanderthal position, the physical and cultural characteristics of Homo erectus. So Homo erectus, Neanderthals, Australopithecus, and Rhodesian, they have been constantly there, and they are being asked with a higher weightage also in the recent time. The unit 1.7, which speaks about the biological basis of life, the cell, DNA, structure, replication, protein synthesis, gene mutation, chromosomes, and cell division. Not much of the questions they have been asked over here. Just one question you find in 2024 this year, and then one question you'll find in 2021, which is relative to gene expression, biological aspects of it. And of course, this then links to the paper 2, where the Indian archaeological sites or Indian archaeological developments, where units 1 and units 2 discuss about these things. Linking these two things together or understanding these two things together, they can fetch approximately 30 to 40 marks, right? Respectively, paper 1, paper 2, which becomes a significant number of questions that can be drawn over. And these are more theoretical aspects. The understanding of it say for example, if you are a science, technology and engineering background student opting for anthropology in the recent years, then understanding the socio-cultural anthropology becomes a tedious task also for you, for a science student. Then fetching marks from these, the archaeological anthropological sites or the archaeological anthropological developments, becomes easy for you, because these are theoretical. These are those which can be taken up with an ease. These are those which can be understood with an ease, and the domains have been not varying, or the domains have not been very much diverting also in the previous years, if you understand, right? When you look into archaeological understanding, the questions, they have been there in the same domain: erectors, Rhodesian, Pleistocene, Neolithic. The topics, they have been there in archaeological anthropology, and these topics, they in and of, they keep on varying. So you can fetch marks over here, the science, technology and engineering background students. For those which are the humanities background students also opting for anthropology only, for them also understanding archaeological anthropology is easier, just to fetch out the basic timeline, right? The basic timeline of development of humans. Now, what usually we do, or when you look into the surrounding, there are multiple different types of the notes, there are multiple different types of the mentors also that you come across during the preparation of anthropology. And the first and foremost thing is, it becomes quite tedious in their approach itself. When they approach things, they approach those things in a much classical way, the conventional way, or we can say the boring way, I would say. Why do I say boring way? Because much of the theoretical aspect of anthropology is being spoken of in the initial things. And of course, the nature of the topics have been like that. We can say unit 1 or unit up, the various different segments of unit 1 also. They have been dealt more theoretically. Definitions are there. Understanding point of view is not being developed. And the second and foremost thing that happens with archaeological anthropology is that we keep on reading the archaeological anthropology subjects, subtopics, subpoints, different culture, different segments of human development, archaeological developments, different fossils of humans. We also speak about primates, but this all remains more disjunctured. And if it remains disjunctured, you speak about primates separately, you speak about primate characteristics separately, the expressions separately, the development or the fossil development separately. All these things, they have been spoken of in pockets, in packets also. Suppose they have been defined with the units also. And then they have been fetched up with different theories also. Right? Darwinism, post and pre-Darwinism, etc. They have been spoken. Right? Pope's law, all these. In pockets, all these, they have been spoken. But the finest or the finest method of understanding this particular thing in anthropology or the archaeological anthropology is just create a timeline and fill up the things in that particular time. Right? Starting from the evolution, because now again, you see, unit this, the biological basis of life, the cell, DNA structure, protein synthesis, gene mutation, chromosome and cell division. This, the primate ecology, the primate anthropology, and then you look into this, the evolutionary trend and the primate taxonomy, the human evolution and emergence of the man. These are chronological things. So develop an understanding over here, to develop an understanding of all these topics all together with an interlinked forte. What we need to do is develop a timeline of life origination, evolution of life, what has happened with the things gradually, and then come down to humans or hominoids itself. Come down to hominoids and then expand that canvas. Now, link those all particular things that you have seen with the human, with the evolution of the life, the geological evolution, the earthbound evolution, the evolution of life, and then the hominids and their developments. Now, the hominids and their developments, their timeline, different timeline, how different hominids they have been developed, and then demarcate them with their distribution, with their culture, with their understanding. Now, in doing so, we would be able to understand the evolution of the man, the theories relative to the evolution of the man, the understandings of the understanding relative to the chronological development of the man, different types of the man, their characteristics, their understanding, they all come down, and then link it up with the archaeological development, the Pleistocene, the Pliocene, and the Neolithic developments, etc. That all can be taken up over here in a chronology. When we arrange these things in a chronology, it becomes easy. It becomes easier not only for the science student, it becomes easier for the humanities background student also. And understanding those things would help us fetch up more marks over here. This archaeological anthropology, it has been there and it has been spoken of, and it can be taken up, and this fetch up more marks. But next you understand, then you have the basic introduction of cultural anthropology, or we say the socio-cultural anthropology, where the nature of culture, society, marriage, family, kinship, they have all been discussed, and this topic is there, is omnipresent, because this links it up with the other part of the topic also, which is the economic organizations, the political organizations, the religion, and the anthropological theories. Now this again would make approximately the 30% of the questions which are being asked in paper 1, right? Specifically in the section 1 of paper 1, section A of paper 1, right? Where society, culture, etc., where you look into this, the William Ogburn and the cultural lag, or the Arjun Applaudel's conceptualization of the global cultural economy and the historical and cultural context that led to ethnocentrism, cultural relativism. Now, the ideas of Redcliffe Brown in status, role, and institutions, right? Evaluating different types of the social stratification with suitable numbers, and the Erwin Goffman concept of total institutions, its relevance in contemporary society. These two things which are there, and these are more contemporary understanding related topics which are to be dealt with. Now again, when we approach this cultural anthropology, the cultural anthropology has been given much of the drag of more of, we can say, theoretical understanding. The practical understanding of cultural anthropology has to be carved out, because these all things, when you look into this, the Erwin Goffman's concept of total institutions and its relevance in the contemporary society, this is something which indicates this is not a traditional question. This is a question which has to be interlinked and which has to be understood very properly. When you look into this, critically examine the Arjun Appadurai's conceptualization of global cultural economy. This again is also not something where you find with the theoretical knowledge also, or you simply go with the theories itself. You have to link various things together. This year also, in 2024, the questions relative to particularism has been answered, and that particularism has been something which has been contradictory to various different theories which have been spoken of in social cultural anthropology, but has not been very briefly carved out. Or even the Levi-Strauss understanding in 2024 that you speak about, not very much carved out. So when you look into all these aspects of anthropology, or when you look into different aspects of socio-cultural anthropology also, you have to understand this particular thing, that okay, fine, if you are carving out various different things, if you are extracting various different things, then in which way marks are being fetched out in this, and the understanding, the theoretical understanding that is there with the syllabus, with the topics that you have, the contemporary understanding or contemporary linking of all those things is more important. Not single-handedly linking the thinker or understanding the thinker, but linking that particular thing with the cultural aspects, with the Indian aspects, and then with the contemporary aspects. Because the nature of questions may be like that itself. You may find those questions that may be simpler also, that may be easy to approach also currently in the anthropological syllabus also. But in the future, if the nature of or the number of students appearing for anthropology, they increase, or the nature of anthropology becomes more contemporary, then these topics would become the most tedious topics, because they are not being properly interlinked, they are not being properly understood, they are not being properly demarcated. This is just the theoretical understanding of which is being developed and which is being written, right? Of course, this becomes tedious. This takes out 30% marks, and many a times one of the option in the question which is being linked with the cultural anthropology or the socio-cultural anthropology becomes tedious. So such type of the questions, sometimes they do not fetch more marks than the type of the questions that we can look into later as well with the biological anthropology, right? Like, for example, discuss the role of marriage regulations in traditional societies and in strengthening the social solidarity, marriage regulations and alliance theory, right? Then with the Lewis Morgan classification of the family, or the Krober's contribution of kinship or descent, contradiction and principles of the residents in the matrilineal societies, descent groups, etc. They become those topics which are there, which have been asked, which are important for us, right? Right, then you look into different aspects of questions related to the economic organizations also, where the impact of globalization on economic systems of indigenous community. Now this again, you derive it out, you derive it in from paper 2 also. Just a simple understanding of organizations may not help us over here, or the mechanism of social control and different kinds of the political system. Again, you derive it again, or the examples you derive it again over here from paper 2. Or the shaman sorcerer's medicine and the medicine of man. This again became problematic. The animism and the deep ecology, this was easier, which could have been derived out easily. Or the questions relative to the evolutionism of the Taylor and Morgan, evolution of marriage, family and socio-political organization, or the structural functionalism of the Redcliffe Brown, or the particularism of Franz Boas. They have been there. These questions they have been asked. This has been asked in 2023 also, 2024 also, or the aspects relative to that, right? Margaret Mead, etc. These are defined things in the syllabus, but understanding these things with an interactive and interlinked understanding would be more important, like the participatory rural appraisals and the participatory learning actions over there in the economic and social organization, political organization, that becomes important. Now, this, which is the unit number 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 6th, 7th, the socio-cultural anthropology, which helps us carve out various different things, but there are also those topics in anthropology which do have more of the complexity, and in the upcoming forms the complexity is would more increase with the socio-cultural anthropology, and these complexities are not those which are not to be dealt, or these complexities are not those which should not be answered, but the complexities would be more in the type of questions that would be asked in the upcoming year, which would surmount to approximately 30% of the questions which are being asked, and would of course influence the marks which are to be fetched, because as the complex nature, or as the interdisciplinary nature, or as the interlinked nature of these particular topics would be seen, complexities of it would be more, the marks fetching abilities in these topics would be comparatively less, right? So when you need to fetch more marks over here in GS paper 1, when you need to fetch more marks with the topics which are not evolving so high, or which are not more complex right now, becomes the unit number 9, 10 and 11, which simply speaks about the human genetics, Mendelian genetics, the concept of polymorphism, etc., and also deals up with the chromosomes and the chromosome aberration, the sex aberrations, etc., autosomal aberrations and the genetic imprints. This question we have seen, the aberrations of the 2024 you could see, right? And then the race and racism, age, sex, population variations, the HLA, HB, RH grouping, etc. question you have seen over here in 2024 also. Environmental stress, the concept of ecological anthropology and epidemiological anthropology also over there, which has been there. And the concept of human growth, aging, relevance of menarche. On these particular topics, which we may look into as the topics of biological anthropology. But these are those topics, the biological anthropological topics, which are fetching more number of questions, approximately 40% questions that you see in paper 1, or the marks that you see in paper 1, they are fetching out of biological anthropology. Now see, 40% from biological anthropology, 30% coming down from social anthropology, approximately 25% questions coming down from archaeological anthropology, and the rest of the 15% questions coming down from the linked aspects of either socio-cultural or the contemporary anthropology. This forms the very basic of paper 1. This is more evolving, this is becoming more complex in your paper. This static knowledge based, right, of course becomes tedious for humanities background students, but once the number of questions, if they are being fished out, if the number of questions they have been taken out also, this becomes easy. This, which is, if the timeline has been properly demarcated, if the understanding is properly demarcated, the issues are not many and not varying also. And this, which is the research methodologies. If we compare this, this is simply a ratio of 30s, 70s to 30. If you fetch out 10% marks, or if you fetch out 10% marks over here, or we can say not exactly 10%, if you take out 10% from here, you take out 50% from here, it would be easy to attain more number of marks, it would be easy to attain more number of marks coming out of it. 150 plus marks, if it is to be assumed in paper 1, they can be easily attained over. So do's and don'ts, if we understand of the anthropology or anthropological things, if we understand, then the do's and don'ts of anthropology over here speaks about focusing more over archaeological, biological, and the research methodologies would fetch more marks because they are less dynamic subjects, they are more static topics. Number and the type and variabilities of the questions have been lesser across the PYQs if you look into, like the pedigree analysis in 2024, or the polygenic inheritance, or the assumptions must be made, population genetic equilibrium, right? These are genetic polymorphism again, right? So the number of topics, they are not varying much over here, or the number of topics, they have been easier over here, or the abnormalities of the chromosomes with suitable example. Again, you see this simpler type of the question in 2024, repetitive. Genetic imprinting in human diseases, again, repetitive question in 2024. You see, right? Or the question arising from the same domain, race and ethnicity in 2023, again in 2024. Understand the blood grouping of HLA system, 2022-24 HBO systems. Right? Acclimatation in 2021, again linked question in 2024. Right? Then you look into the different forms of malnutrition, of course that comes from the other aspects of it, or linked question again in 2020. Burden of lifestyle diseases in 2023-22, linked question was there in 2020. So the type, nature, variabilities, the varieties of the questions, they have been constantly repeating over here, in a loop over here. The biological aspect of this, why I say that if you look into the type, nature, number of questions that are being fetched over here, then of course you see the socio-cultural and rest of the balance. The socio-cultural and the rest of the balance is quite clear. And the type of questions which have been complex, which have been tedious in socio-cultural or becoming tedious in socio-cultural and anthropology, that you do not see in rest of the topics. They are plain, simple, factual, or understanding based questions, which can be dealt easily, which can be dealt with a larger forte or with a larger perspective over here. One of the things that becomes important in paper 1, or one of the things that can be carved out in paper 1, is the applications of anthropology, where the application in sports, nutritional, you have seen malnutrition related question over there. Forensic anthropology, you have seen this particular question in 2024 again, right? The principle of personal identification, paternity diagnosis, genetic counseling and eugenics, DNA technology. Again, this question you see in 2024. These are those topics which have predominantly become important in the recent array of the questions, in the recent dimensions of the questions. The cytogenetics or the reproductive biology, again linking that particular thing to the human genetics and the human growth and population dynamics also. These things, they have been there and they are constantly increasing, or they are there, like the practical application of DNA technology in current scenario, or discussing the personal identification based on skeletal systems, or anthropological knowledge of human body used in designing equipment and artifacts in the human use, again forensic anthropology. So questions are constantly there, and the number of questions are there, and these are those questions which can easily fetch marks over here, right? Which can easily carve more marks over here. So the balance has to be understood with the paper one. The balance has to be understood with paper one, in which way this particular balance is to be driven, in which way this particular balance is to be carved out so as to fetch more marks. And the balance, we have discussed but that particular thing, right? How this particular thing has to be carved out, that has been discussed. Now looking on to the anthropology paper 2 again, if you look into, which is comparatively an easier paper, or becomes easier with respect to the understandings which are being developed with general studies also, right? Of course, these all things you might be knowing, like the questions if you look into over here in paper 2, then the digitization of the rural economy, question coming from Indian villages, origin of the Indian state societies, Syro-Malabar Christians, or the artisan tribes of Jharkhand, coming from the tribals of India, causing these causes of stunting and wasting amongst tribal children. Again, the problems associated to tribals. Now, then you find another question coming from particularly vulnerable tribal groups, PVTGs, and why PVTGs are called primitive tribal groups, the understanding based, the contemporary debate over there in anthropology paper 2. Then PESA Act and empowerment of the local self-governance and impacting the women's political participants. Again, interlink coming from paper 1 also over here, right? Then the colonial history of the Indian anthropology, highlighting the critical role played by the Indian anthropologists. Again, this, the unit 1 of paper 1. If we are carving out the scholarical understanding of anthropology, the Indian anthropology can be dealt over here, and the comparative understanding of that has to be taken into the development of anthropology in India. Then the Rakhi Gadi site, again, archaeological anthropology over there, and the linking over here, Dhaulavira, Rakhi Gadi, these all sites, they have been spoken of in across the PYQs in paper 2. Then M.N. Srinivas and L.P. Vidyarthi, these all the major anthropologists, Kamte, etc., they have been spoken of constantly, and their role has been precisely there. Then impact of forest policies from 1878 to 2006 in land alienation and deprivation of the rights of the tribal community. This is a traditional debate which has been spoken of, right? Constant issues, they have been spoken of. Then this question, the ethical concerns related to biological and sociological anthropology because of the recent advantages in AI and genetic research. This again is a question which speaks about the contemporary nature of this particular topic. Then history of tribal activist and the freedom fighter Birsa Munda, impact on his sacrifice, this again. And then the Indian changing population dynamics in the last 50 years, this again. Again, some of the links can come up over here from paper 1. Then when you look into the B.K. Roy Burman's buffer zone concept, ILO convention of number 169 of 1989, the agricultural practices of Aptanis, the 6 schedule areas, and the constitutional safeguards of the backward classes, which was the 5th question, which was the compulsory topics. Again, these topics. And then the custodian of the natural resources are the tribals, but they are the most deprived. The question relative to this and the question relative to the forest, they have been all in the same debate of discussions. The secularism, religiosity, religious fundamentalism, and spiritualism in the anthropological practices. This again can be carved directly from the debates in sociocultural anthropology over there in paper 1. right? P.K. Bhowmick and the discriminalization status of the Lodha tribe, right? This has been there. Now, COVID-19, this question, COVID-19 and critically examine the existing paradigms of this holistic health for marginalized sections of the society, drawing inferences from COVID-19 pandemic, and criticism, the origin of the caste system and its criticism, the ethno-nationalism anthropology, the Paleolithic sites from South India and suitable examples, the theocratic states of the secular, liberal and democratic states, and the economic social development impacts on the tribal communities, etc. They have all been the questions which have been contemporary and which have been discussed constantly. This in paper 2. Right? Now, as we have carved out things in paper 1, we can also carve out things in paper 2, where when we look into paper 2, section A and section B, the higher influences of type, nature and questions are being given to section A, where the contemporary debates have been constantly there with section A, which we have seen with the paper also. And the contemporary debates can be easily sorted over here with the, if we look into the basic syllabus of anthropology also over here, the paper 2 also, the Indian culture, Mesolithic, Neolithic and proto-historic sites, we have seen this thing. Rakhi Ghadi, the question has been asked over here in 2024. The paleo-anthropological evidences from Shivaliks and Narmada Basin, right? And the ethno-archaeological sites like foraging, fishing, pastoral and the peasant communities, and the demographic profile of ethnic and linguistic elements in Indian population. They have all been there. These topics, they do find 1 or 2 questions every year when we look into the paper 2 aspects of it. What finds more question over here is the questions relative to this religion systems and again the caste systems, the caste mobilities, the theories of caste dominance and the dominant caste. We have seen this particular question, the caste system in India and its criticism just now, the sacred complex nature of the man's spirit, the impact of Buddhism, Jainism, Islam and Christianity. Now, of course, these are those which are the discussing topics. These are those which are constantly evolving topics, or there are multiple domains of these particular topic. The type and nature of the questions, they are more contemporary over here. The emergence and development of Indian contribution in this 18th, 19th and the 20th century of the scholars, the contribution of Indian anthropology in tribal and case studies, we have seen 3 questions again over here. That's why with this itself, we say that the section A of the paper 2 fetches more marks over here because of the nature and the type of questions which are being asked over here. These are simple questions and they do not have, we need not to have much of the we can say contemporary understanding for that. The understandings are being developed, they are properly asked, they are properly written, their understandings are being written, and their contemporary linkages can be have also been driven. They can be easily sorted over. Then the village part, the unit number 5, which speaks about the agrarian relations in the Indian villages, the impact of globalization in Indian villages. We have seen this particular question again. Rural economy, digitalization of the agrarian systems of the, or different types of the agricultural systems, the conventional agricultural system. The questions have been constantly asked in this also. The linguistic and religious minorities and their social, political and economic status. The questions relative to forest rights, the questions relative to PESA, the questions relative to that can also be discussed over here with these, right? Then the westernization, modernization, interplay of these are all those which are contemporary questions and can fetch more marks over, right? Again, that's why the section A of paper 2 can be fetching more marks. The second aspect of it is the tribal situation of the country, the developmental projects and the tribal issues that we discuss about, they can be asked in paper 2 specifically, and the problems exploit of tribes, their ethnicity related things. Now these fetch approximately 20% questions. That is unit number 6 and 7 directly fetch approximately 20% of the questions, but indirectly influence approximately 20% more of the questions. Now tribals and their contemporary understanding, their contemporary developments, that fetches out more marks over it, which is 40% of the marks which can be driven. And but of course, those questions, they are the questions of contemporary nature. Rather, when we fetch out more marks, understanding these and the unit 1, 2, 3 and the 4, when you look into this and the traditional understanding of it or the conventional topics related to this, these approximately fetches 50% of the marks. So if you are looking into, if you are deriving in more marks, or if you are looking in approximately say 150 plus marks in in anthropology paper 2 also, then you would desire these units to be dealt in a priority. So overall, we have seen how the basic analysis, or how the basic questions, or the nature of the questions, they have been asked in 2024 analysis also, paper 1, paper 2. We have understood how the syllabus can be taken out, how and what and when the different types of the topics which are important or priority topics over here, right? So keeping an eye over all these particular topics, or keeping a justified understanding of all these particular topics would definitely help us get out of this particular loop, or fetch more marks out of it, right? It is not only about, but again, you understand this particular thing in anthropology, it is not only about cramming the things, it is not only about reading the things, it is not only about the topics which have been dealt or topics have been taught in the class. It is more important that how chronologically, how with a junction, these topics have been linked. Like for example, paper 1 and paper 2, these two different aspects of the syllabus, they have been quite parallelly understood, and the questions, they have been quite parallelly influenced also. People may say anything, people may understand, okay fine, ye to topic mein hai. People may say, okay, this is the traditional thing. People may say, okay fine, this is the contemporary, this is not contemporary, this is there. But how well you can carve out paper 1 things and link with paper 2 things and write those things, particularly with examples in both the papers, become important. So this is about all these things which have been spoken of, or the anthropology related understanding how to fetch more marks or score more marks in anthropology. We are also starting up with the anthropology test series at Prodegy IAS on 21st of June. This particular test series would be a test series comprising of 8 tests, 4 sectional tests, where part 1, part 2, part 1, part 2 of both the papers would be discussed, then the complete paper 1, paper 2, and then the mock test, right? You can enroll with us for the anthropology test series, where we can discuss more of these things, or more of these fundamental aspects, how to link up with these particular things, or how to link up all those particular aspects, and how to fetch more marks in different topics, or how to prioritize these particular topics, right? Thank you very much for your time and patience.